Millionaire humiliated the black officer at the gate, and he was the one who saved her husband that same day. The rain hammered against the windshield of the silver Mercedes as Victoria Ashford pressed the horn for the third time. Her perfectly manicured nails drummed impatiently on the steering wheel, her diamond rings catching the gray afternoon light. Through the tinted glass, she could see him, the security officer approaching slowly, his rain-soaked uniform clinging to his shoulders. Officer Marcus Thompson had been standing at the gates of Riverside Heights, the most exclusive gated community in Charleston, for 7 hours straight. His shift should have ended at 3, but Officer Jenkins had called in sick again, and Marcus needed the overtime. His daughter's college application fees were due next week, and his wife's medication costs kept climbing. So he stood there, in the pouring rain, doing his job with the same quiet dignity he brought to every shift. Finally, Victoria muttered as Marcus reached her window. She didn't roll it down completely, just enough to speak through. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Marcus bent slightly, rain dripping from his cap. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'll need to see your resident pass or check you in with—" "I don't need a pass, I live here. Ashford, Victoria Ashford, mansion number 12. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the sound of rain like a blade. "Now open the gate." Marcus pulled out his tablet, water drops falling on the screen. "Mrs. Ashford, I apologize, but I don't see your vehicle registered in our system for today. If you could just give me a moment to—" "Are you serious right now?" Victoria's voice rose, her face flushing red. She glanced at her watch, a Cartier that cost more than Marcus made in 6 months. "I have a charity gala committee meeting in 20 minutes. I don't have time for this incompetence." "Ma'am, I understand, but for security purposes—" "Security purposes?" She laughed, a cold sound without humor. "Let me guess. You're new here, aren't you? Probably couldn't cut it as a real cop, so now you're playing dress up at a gate." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "Ma'am, I've been working here for 3 years. I'm just following protocol. If you could please—" "3 years?" Victoria interrupted, her eyes narrowing as she truly looked at him for the first time. She saw his dark skin, the tired lines around his eyes, the name tag that read, M. Thompson. 3 years and you still don't recognize the residents? Or is it that you just don't think people who look like you belong in a place like this, so you assume we all need extra scrutiny? The words hung in the air like poison. Marcus felt his chest tighten, that familiar ache that came with swallowing words that burned to be spoken. He'd felt it before, countless times, but it never got easier. "Mrs. Ashford," he said quietly, his voice carefully controlled, "this has nothing to do with—" "Oh, spare me the politically correct speech." She waved her hand dismissively. "I know exactly what this is. You see an expensive car, a woman who clearly belongs here, and you decide to flex your tiny bit of authority because it's the only power you'll ever have in your miserable life." Behind Victoria's car, 2 other vehicles had pulled up, their drivers waiting. Marcus could feel their eyes on him, witnesses to his humiliation. His radio crackled, another officer asking if everything was okay at the main gate. "Ma'am," Marcus tried one more time, his voice barely above a whisper, "I'm just doing my job. I need to verify—" "Your job?" Victoria's laugh was cruel now. "Your job is to open gates for people who actually matter. People who pay the homeowner fees that pay your salary. I don't have time for this ridiculous power trip from someone who—" She paused, her eyes traveling over him with undisguised contempt. "Someone like you." The silence that followed was deafening, even through the rain. Marcus stood there, water streaming down his face, mixing with something that might have been tears, but could just as easily have been rain. He thought of his daughter, Jasmine, who was probably at home right now, working on her college essays about heroes and role models. He thought of his wife, Angela, who always told him that dignity wasn't about how others treated you, but how you treated yourself in the face of disrespect. "I'll call the gate supervisor," Marcus said finally, his voice hollow. "And I'll also note in my report that you refuse to follow standard security procedures." Victoria's face twisted with rage. You'll note what? Listen to me very carefully. She leaned closer to the window, her voice dropping to a threatening hiss. My husband, Robert Ashford, sits on the Homeowners Association board. One phone call from me and you'll be looking for a new job by tomorrow morning. Do you understand me? Marcus said nothing. He simply reached for his radio. That's what I thought, Victoria spat. People like you are all the same, always looking for a handout, always playing the victim, always. Her words were cut off by a sudden violent sound, the screech of tires, the crunch of metal, and then screaming. Lots of screaming. Marcus's head snapped toward the intersection just visible beyond the gate. A black SUV had collided with a sedan, and smoke was already billowing from both vehicles. Without thinking, without hesitation, Marcus dropped his tablet and ran. Where do you think you're going? Victoria shouted after him. Get back here and open this gate. But Marcus was already gone, his training kicking in, his radio calling for emergency services, his legs carrying him toward the disaster, even as his heart pounded with adrenaline and something deeper, the fundamental human instinct to help, regardless of who needed it or what they'd done to you. Behind him, Victoria sat in her Mercedes, fury radiating from every pore. She grabbed her phone, ready to call her husband, ready to end this insolent officer's career. She had no idea that in less than 30 minutes, her entire world would shatter and reform in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. She had no idea that the man she'd just humiliated, the man whose dignity she'd trampled in the rain, would become the only thing standing between her husband and death. She had no idea that sometimes God's justice works in mysterious ways, and that the universe has a way of teaching lessons to those who think themselves above learning. The rain continued to fall, washing away nothing, revealing everything. And Marcus Thompson, soaking wet and heart-heavy, ran toward the smoke and chaos, carrying with him the kind of courage that doesn't come from uniforms or badges, but from something far deeper. The unshakable belief that every life matters, even the lives of those who believe some lives matter more than others. Marcus reached the accident scene in 45 seconds. The black SUV had T-boned the sedan at the intersection, and both vehicles were smoking, their frames twisted and broken. Glass littered the wet pavement like scattered diamonds, and the smell of gasoline mixed with the rain created a sickening perfume that made his stomach turn. Sir? Sir, can you hear me? Marcus called out, approaching the sedan first. The driver was slumped over the steering wheel, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. Marcus checked for a pulse, weak but present. His radio crackled as dispatch confirmed ambulances were en route, estimated arrival time 8 minutes. 8 minutes. In trauma situations, that could be a lifetime. Marcus moved to the SUV, his boots crunching on debris. The driver's side door was crushed inward, and he could hear groaning from inside. He pulled on the passenger door, jammed. The back door, jammed. He ran around to the driver's side and peered through the shattered window. That's when his heart stopped. The man trapped inside, unconscious and bleeding, his chest pinned by the steering column, his breathing shallow and labored, was wearing an expensive gray suit. On the passenger seat lay a briefcase with gold initials embossed on the leather. R.A. Robert Ashford. Marcus's mind reeled. The man whose wife had just threatened to destroy his career. The man who sat on the HOA board. The man who, according to Victoria's venomous words, was supposed to end Marcus's livelihood with a single phone call. For a split second, just one heartbeat, Marcus felt something dark flicker through his mind. How easy it would be to wait, to do the minimum, to let the ambulance handle it when they arrived. After all, this man's wife had just degraded him, humiliated him, reduced him to nothing more than his skin color and his uniform. But the flicker died as quickly as it came, snuffed out by something stronger. The oath he'd taken, the values his mother had raised him with, the prayers his wife whispered every morning before he left for work. Lord, keep him safe, and let him be a light, even in darkness. Marcus grabbed the door handle and pulled with everything he had. The metal groaned, but didn't give. He looked around frantically. A tire iron lay near the curb, thrown from one of the vehicles. He grabbed it and wedged it into the doorframe using leverage and desperate strength. The door gave way with a screech. Robert Ashford's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. They were blue, clouded with pain and confusion. "Help," he whispered, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. "Please, help me." "I've got you, sir," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Stay with me. What's your name?" Robert Ashford." The man coughed and Marcus saw more blood. Internal injuries. Possibly a punctured lung. This was bad. Marcus keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Thompson at the intersection of Riverside and Oak. I need that ambulance now. We have critical injuries, possible internal bleeding. Patient is going into shock." "ETA 4 minutes, Officer Thompson." 4 minutes. Marcus looked at Robert's pale face, his labored breathing. The steering column had him pinned and the smell of gasoline was getting stronger. 4 minutes might be 3 minutes too long. Marcus made a decision. He climbed partially into the vehicle, bracing himself against the frame. "Sir, I'm going to try to lift this off you. It's going to hurt, but I need you to stay conscious. Can you do that for me?" Robert's eyes met his, really met his, for the first time. There was recognition there, perhaps. Or maybe just the desperate gratitude of a dying man seeing his only hope. "Please," he whispered again. Marcus positioned himself, said a silent prayer, and pushed upward with every ounce of strength in his body. The steering column shifted, grinding against metal. Robert screamed ready a horrible raw sound that cut through the rain. But it moved, just enough. "Now," Marcus shouted. "Pull yourself out. Use your arms." Robert, driven by survival instinct and adrenaline, clawed his way backward. Marcus held the column, his muscles screaming, his back feeling like it might snap. And then Robert was free, collapsing onto the pavement outside the vehicle. Marcus let go and stumbled out, his entire body shaking. He immediately began assessing Robert's injuries. Broken ribs, definitely. Possible spinal damage. The head wound was bleeding heavily. Marcus removed his own uniform shirt, now soaked with rain and sweat, and pressed it against the wound. "Stay with me, Mr. Ashford," Marcus said, his voice gentle despite everything. "Help is almost here. You're going to be okay." Robert's eyes opened again, focusing on Marcus's face with difficulty. I know you," he mumbled, confusion mixing with pain. "The gate. You work at—" "Don't try to talk, sir. Save your strength." "My wife, Victoria. She called me. So angry." Robert coughed again, and Marcus could hear the wetness in his lungs. "Said she was going to have someone fired." At the gate? The irony was so thick Marcus could taste it. He pressed harder on the wound, watching Robert's eyes flutter. "Sir, stay awake. Look at me. What's your daughter's name? Do you have children?" "Caroline," Robert whispered. 16. Honor student, wants to be a doctor. His eyes focused on Marcus with sudden clarity, even through the pain. Are you the one? The officer He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Marcus met his gaze steadily. "It doesn't matter, sir. Right now all that matters is keeping you alive until help arrives." "Why?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "Why are you? After what Why would you?" The sirens were getting closer now, their wails cutting through the rain. Marcus could see the flashing lights approaching. But he took a moment, just one moment, to answer honestly. "Because this is who I am, Mr. Ashford. Not who your wife thinks I am. Not what she called me. This is who I choose to be, regardless of how I'm treated." Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. "Every life has value. Every person deserves help when they're in trouble. That's not something that changes based on whether someone respects me or not." Tears mixed with rain on Robert's face. Whether from pain or something else, Marcus couldn't tell. "I'm sorry," Robert whispered. "I'm so sorry. For whatever she—" "Later," Marcus said gently. You can apologize later. Right now you focus on staying alive. Your daughter needs her father." The ambulance screeched to a halt and paramedics poured out. Marcus gave them a rapid assessment, his training taking over, his voice professional and clear. They worked quickly, stabilizing Robert, preparing him for transport. "Is he going to make it?" Marcus asked the lead paramedic, a woman named Sarah he'd worked with before. She glanced at Robert, then at Marcus, her expression grave. "If you hadn't pulled him out when you did, if you'd waited for us, I don't think so. The internal bleeding is severe. He needed every second you gave him." She paused, looking at Marcus with something like awe. "You saved his life." As they loaded Robert into the ambulance, his hand reached out, grabbing Marcus's arm with surprising strength. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "Thank you. Officer Thompson." Marcus nodded, squeezing the man's hand briefly. "Just doing my job, sir." The ambulance doors closed and the vehicle sped away, sirens wailing. Marcus stood there in the rain, his shirt gone, his body aching, his hands shaking from adrenaline crash. Around him, other officers had arrived to manage the scene, direct traffic, take statements. Officer Daniels, a colleague, approached him. "Marcus, man, you okay? That was incredible what you did." "I'm fine," Marcus said automatically, though he wasn't sure that was true. "The guy you pulled out, Robert Ashford, his wife's been calling dispatch nonstop. She's on her way to the hospital now. Apparently she was just at our gate causing a scene about—" Daniels stopped, his eyes widening. "Wait, was that the same woman who was giving you trouble earlier?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. "Oh man," Daniels breathed. "The same woman who threatened to have you fired? Her husband. And you just—" "Like I said," Marcus interrupted quietly, "I was just doing my job." But both men knew it was more than that. So much more. At Charleston Memorial Hospital, Victoria Ashford burst through the emergency room doors like a storm. Her makeup was smeared from crying, her hands shaking as she grabbed the first nurse she saw. "Robert Ashford, my husband. Where is he? I got a call that he was in an accident and—" "Mrs. Ashford?" A doctor approached, his expression serious. "I'm Dr. Chen. Your husband is in surgery right now. He has severe internal injuries, broken ribs, and significant blood loss. The next few hours are critical." Victoria's legs nearly gave out. Is he going to—" The paramedic said someone at the scene performed emergency extraction and provided immediate care. "If not for that intervention, your husband likely wouldn't have survived the trip here." Dr. Chen checked his notes. "An officer, Thompson, Marcus Thompson. He's the reason your husband is alive right now." Victoria's face drained of all color. The name hit her like a physical blow. Marcus Thompson, the officer at the gate, the man she'd humiliated, the man whose career she'd threatened to destroy, the man whose dignity she'd trampled in the rain less than an hour ago, the man who had just saved her husband's life. Victoria's knees buckled, and she sank into a waiting room chair, her entire body trembling. The universe had just taught her a lesson she would never ever forget. Victoria sat in the hospital waiting room, surrounded by luxury she no longer noticed. Her Hermes purse lay forgotten on the floor. Her perfectly styled hair fell in disarray around her face. Her hands, which had so confidently gripped the steering wheel hours ago, now trembled uncontrollably in her lap. Marcus Thompson. The name repeated in her mind like an accusation, like a prayer, like a sentence handed down by a judge she couldn't escape. Around her, other families waited for news of their loved ones. An elderly woman clutched rosary beads, her lips moving in silent prayer. A young couple held each other, the woman's pregnant belly prominent between them. A teenage boy sat alone, his eyes red from crying. Victoria had never really looked at people in waiting rooms before. She'd never had to. Her life had been one of carefully curated experiences, of problems solved with phone calls and checkbooks, of discomfort avoided and inconvenience eliminated. She existed in a bubble where people like Marcus Thompson were meant to open gates and say, "Yes, ma'am," and disappear when no longer needed. but the bubble had burst. "Mrs. Ashford?" A nurse approached, her voice gentle. "Your husband is out of surgery. Dr. Chen would like to speak with you." Victoria stood on shaking legs and followed the nurse down sterile corridors that smelled of antiseptic and fear. Dr. Chen met her outside the ICU, his surgical cap still on, exhaustion evident in his eyes. "The surgery went as well as could be expected," he began. "We repaired the internal bleeding, stabilized his spine, and set his ribs. The next 48 hours will be critical, but—" He paused, his expression softening. "Mrs. Ashford, I need you to understand something. Your husband coded twice on the operating table. His injuries were catastrophic. The only reason he's alive right now is because someone pulled him from that vehicle before it caught fire. Yes, there was a small fire that started about 2 minutes after the extraction and provided immediate medical intervention." Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. "Fire? Officer Thompson saved your husband's life in more ways than one. He also prevented what would have been a much more tragic outcome. Doctor." Chen looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You must be very grateful to him." Grateful. The word felt foreign, like something spoken in a language she'd forgotten how to speak. "Can I see my husband?" Victoria whispered. 5 minutes. He's heavily sedated, but you can sit with him." Robert looked small in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed and kept him tethered to life. Tubes ran from his arms, his chest, his nose. Bandages covered his head and torso. The strong, confident man who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions with ease now lay broken and helpless. Victoria sank into the chair beside his bed and took his hand carefully, afraid she might hurt him. "Robert," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." His eyes fluttered open slightly, unfocused. "Victoria." "Shh, don't talk. Save your strength." "The officer." Robert's voice was barely audible. "The man at the gate." Victoria's throat closed. I know it was him. You were so angry when you called me." Each word seemed to cost him tremendous effort. "What did you say to him?" The question hung between them like a physical weight. Victoria opened her mouth, but no sound came out. How could she repeat those words now? How could she confess the cruelty, the casual racism, the dehumanizing contempt she'd shown to the man who had saved her husband's life? She started, tears streaming down her face. "I was terrible to him, Robert. I said terrible things. I threatened his job. I was cruel." Robert's eyes closed, and for a moment Victoria thought he'd fallen back unconscious. But then he spoke again, his voice breaking. "And he still saved me. Why? I don't know," Victoria sobbed. "I don't understand why anyone would, after what because he's a better person than us," Robert whispered. And the words were like a knife to Victoria's heart because they were true. Undeniably, painfully true. A nurse entered, checking monitors. "Mrs. Ashford, I need to ask you to step out for a moment. We need to run some tests." Victoria nodded numbly and left the room. She wandered through the hospital corridors, not really seeing where she was going. She found herself in the chapel, a small quiet room with simple wooden pews and a stained glass window showing a dove in flight. She hadn't prayed in years, not since she was a child and her grandmother had taken her to church every Sunday. Somewhere along the way between building wealth and accumulating status, she'd forgotten how, or maybe she'd just decided she didn't need to. After all, what could God give her that money couldn't buy? But now, sitting in that chapel with her husband fighting for his life because of the mercy of a man she'd degraded, Victoria fell to her knees. "I don't even know if you're listening," she whispered into the silence. "I don't know if I have any right to ask for anything, but please let Robert live. And please," her voice broke, "please help me understand how to become the kind of person who would save someone who hurt them, because I don't think I am, and I hate myself for it." The chapel offered no audible response, but in the silence, Victoria heard something else. the echo of her own words from earlier that day. People like you. Your miserable life. Someone like you. She heard them as if for the first time, hearing not her own voice but imagining them spoken to her daughter, Caroline. What if someone had said those things to Caroline? What if someone had reduced her beautiful, brilliant daughter to nothing more than assumptions and stereotypes? The rage she would have felt, the protective fury, the righteous indignation, all of it crashed over her now but directed inward. Because she had done that. She had been that person, and worse, she'd done it casually, thoughtlessly, as if it were her right. Victoria didn't know how long she stayed in that chapel. When she finally emerged, her eyes red and swollen, her makeup completely gone, she looked like someone who had aged years in hours. She found herself walking toward the emergency room entrance where staff typically gathered. And there, sitting on a bench outside, still in his undershirt because he'd used his uniform shirt to stop Robert's bleeding, was Marcus Thompson. He was filling out paperwork, his face drawn with exhaustion. A hospital blanket was draped around his shoulders. Someone had given him coffee, but it sat untouched beside him, going cold. Victoria stopped in her tracks, her heart hammering. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to walk away, to avoid this confrontation. What could she possibly say? How could any apology be adequate? But she thought of Robert's words. He's a better person than us. And she thought of Caroline, who would be arriving from boarding school tomorrow, who would ask questions, who deserved a mother who could face her own failures. Victoria took a deep breath and walked forward. Marcus looked up as her shadow fell across his paperwork. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything that had happened, everything that couldn't be taken back. "Officer Thompson," Victoria finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus stood slowly, his body language cautious. "Mrs. Ashford, how is your husband?" The simple courtesy of the question, asked without accusation or irony, nearly broke her. He's alive. Because of you." Marcus nodded but said nothing. Victoria started, then stopped. "How did you apologize for trying to destroy someone's dignity? How did you make amends for racism, for cruelty, for casual dehumanization? I need to say something to you, and I need you to know that I understand if you can't forgive me." "I wouldn't forgive me." Marcus remained silent, but his eyes stayed on hers, steady and calm. "What I said to you today at the gate." Victoria's voice shook. "There's no excuse for it. None. I was cruel. I was racist. I was everything that's wrong with people like me who think their wealth and status give them the right to treat others as less than human." The words tumbled out now, raw and honest. "I threatened your job. I demeaned you. I reduced you to nothing but your skin color and tried to make you feel small because it made me feel powerful." Tears streamed down her face. "And then you saved my husband's life. You risked your own safety to pull him from a burning vehicle. You gave him every chance to survive. After what I did to you, after what I said, you still—" Her voice broke completely. "You still saw him as a human being worth saving." Marcus's expression remained unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but clear. "Mrs. Ashford, I didn't save your husband because I'm a saint or because I'm better than anyone else. I saved him because it was the right thing to do. Period. That's my job. That's my oath. But more than that, it's who I choose to be." "But how?" Victoria asked desperately. "How can you do that? How can you help someone after they've shown you who they really are?" Marcus finished for her. He was quiet for a moment, then sat back down on the bench, gesturing for her to sit as well. Victoria did, keeping a respectful distance. "My grandmother used to tell me something," Marcus said, his eyes distant with memory. "She said that carrying hate and anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. If I'd let what you said define my actions, if I'd let your hatred become my hatred, then I'd be the one poisoned, not you." He looked at her directly. "But I won't lie to you, Mrs. Ashford. What you said hurt. It hurt because I've heard versions of it my whole life. From teachers who didn't expect me to succeed. From people who clutched their purses when I walked by. From systems that told me I had to be twice as good to get half as far. His voice remained steady, but Victoria could hear the pain underneath. I've been people like you my entire life. To people like you. Victoria flinched but didn't look away. She deserved every word. But here's what I've learned, Marcus continued. I can't control what other people think of me. I can't control their prejudices or their fear or their need to feel superior. All I can control is who I am and how I act. And I refuse to let anyone's hatred turn me into something I'm not. You're a better person than I am, Victoria said, echoing Robert's words. Maybe, Marcus agreed, surprising her with his honesty. Or maybe I've just had more practice at forgiveness because I've had to. Privilege is a strange thing, Mrs. Ashford. It blinds you to struggles you never have to face. It lets you be cruel without consequences. Usually. He paused. Until today. Victoria nodded, unable to speak. So here's my question for you, Marcus said, his eyes searching hers. What are you going to do now? Apologizing is a start, but apologies without change are just words. Are you going to go back to your mansion and your charity galas and your comfortable life? Or are you going to actually look at the world you live in and see the people you've made invisible? The challenge hung in the air between them. Victoria knew this was the moment, the choice that would define everything that came after. I don't know, she admitted, her honesty raw and painful. I don't know how to be different than I've been. I don't know how to see what I've been taught not to see. But I want to learn. I need to learn. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. That's something, at least. That's a start. He stood, pulling the hospital blanket tighter around his shoulders. I need to finish my report and get home. My wife is probably worried sick, and my daughter has been texting me every 10 minutes. He paused. They're the reason I do what I do, Mrs. Ashford. They're the reason I choose to be better, even when it's hard. Wait, Victoria said as he turned to leave. Please. What can I do? How can I make this right? Marcus looked back at her, and for the first time, she saw a glimmer of something that might have been hope in his eyes. Don't try to make it right, Mrs. Ashford. You can't. What's done is done. But you can make tomorrow different. You can look at your daughter and teach her to see people as human beings first. You can use your privilege to lift others up instead of pushing them down. You can speak up when you hear others saying the things you said to me. He paused. And maybe when you're tempted to judge someone by their uniform or their skin color or their station in life, you can remember that you're looking at someone's father, someone's husband, someone who might just save your life one day. With that, Marcus Thompson walked away, leaving Victoria Ashford sitting on a hospital bench, her world forever changed, her heart broken open in ways that might finally let the light in. Inside the hospital, Robert Ashford slept, his life saved by a man who had every reason to walk away but chose mercy instead. And somewhere in the universe, the scales of justice balance themselves in the way they always do. Not through revenge, but through revelation. Not through punishment, but through the hard, painful grace of seeing yourself as you truly are. Marcus Thompson arrived home at nearly midnight. The small house in the Oakwood neighborhood looked warm and welcoming, light spilling from the kitchen window onto the small front porch where Angela had planted flowers in recycled coffee cans. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, earned through hard work and careful budgeting and the kind of love that makes any space feel like a palace. The front door opened before he could reach for his keys. Angela stood there, her eyes red from crying, still wearing her hospital scrubs from her shift as a nurse's aide. Behind her, 17-year-old Jasmine hovered anxiously, her college prep books forgotten on the couch. Marcus, Angela breathed, and then she was in his arms, holding him so tightly he could barely breathe. Thank God. Thank God you're okay. Jasmine joined the embrace, her voice muffled against his shoulder. Dad, we saw the news. They said you pulled someone from a burning car. They said you almost... I'm fine, Marcus said softly, holding both his girls close. I'm fine, baby, I promise. They moved inside, and Angela made tea the way she always did when the world felt too heavy, strong and sweet, with a touch of honey. Marcus sat at their small kitchen table, the same table where they'd celebrated Jasmine's acceptance letters, where they'd paid bills and planned budgets and shared thousands of meals. Tell us, Angela said gently, sitting across from him and taking his hands. Tell us what happened. So Marcus did. He told them about the woman at the gate, about the cruel words, about the threats. He watched Jasmine's face darken with anger, and Angela's eyes fill with familiar, weary pain. The pain of hearing once again about the casual cruelty her husband faced just for existing in his skin. And then, Marcus continued, his voice growing quieter, the accident happened. And the man trapped in the car, it was her husband. Jasmine's eyes went wide. The woman who said those things to you? That was her husband you saved? Marcus nodded. Robert Ashford. He almost died, Jazz. If I'd waited even 2 more minutes. But you didn't wait, Angela said, her voice thick with emotion. Even after what she'd done, you didn't wait. How could I? Marcus looked at his wife, this woman who had stood beside him through 20 years of struggles and small victories, who had believed in him when the world said men like him didn't matter. How could I be anything other than who you've always believed me to be? Jasmine stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I don't understand, she said, her voice sharp with youth and righteous anger. Dad, that woman tried to destroy you. She humiliated you, threatened your job, our livelihood, and you saved her husband's life? How is that fair? How is that justice? Marcus looked at his daughter, this brilliant young woman who would soon leave for college, who was learning to navigate a world that would judge her before knowing her, who needed to understand this lesson more than anyone. Come here, baby girl, he said gently. Jasmine sat back down, her jaw set stubbornly, tears of anger in her eyes. You remember what we talked about when you were applying to colleges? Marcus asked. When you got that rejection from Princeton and you said it was because of your address, because they saw Oakwood and assumed things? Jasmine nodded reluctantly. And what did I tell you then? That I couldn't control other people's prejudices, Jasmine recited. Only my own excellence. That's right. And it's the same principle here, Jazz. Mrs. Ashford's racism, her cruelty, that's hers to carry, not mine. If I'd let her hatred determine my actions, if I'd let her turn me into someone who could walk away from a dying man, then she would have won. She would have made me into the very thing she accused me of being, someone less than human. But she doesn't deserve your mercy, Jasmine protested. Maybe not, Marcus agreed, but her husband didn't deserve to die because of her sins. And I don't deserve to carry the poison of choosing revenge over righteousness. He reached across and took his daughter's hand. Jazz, you're going to face people like Mrs. Ashford your whole life. People who see your beautiful brown skin and make assumptions. People who hear your name and decide they know your story. And every single time you'll have a choice. Become bitter or become better. Your father's right, Angela added softly. Baby, I've been a nurse's aide for 15 years. I've cleaned bedpans and changed sheets for people who wouldn't look me in the eye, who've called me names, who've acted like I was invisible. And every single day I choose to do my job with dignity because that's who I am, not because of how they treat me. But doesn't it make you angry? Jasmine's voice cracked. Doesn't it make you want to just stop trying? Stop being the better person? Every day, Angela admitted, her honesty startling. Every single day, baby. But then I come home to this house, to this family, and I remember why I keep choosing grace over grudges. Because this, she gestured around their modest kitchen, this is real. Their hatred isn't. Their prejudice isn't. This love, this family, this is what matters. Marcus's phone buzzed, a text from Officer Daniels. Man, you're all over the news. Hero officer saves life of man whose wife threatened him. You've gone viral. Call me. Marcus frowned and opened his social media. Daniels was right. The story had exploded. Someone at the hospital had leaked the details, and now the internet was ablaze with the narrative. Racist woman humiliates black officer. Officer saves her husband's life anyway. The comments ranged from praise for Marcus to vitriol directed at Victoria. Victoria Ashford was trending. People had found her social media, her charity organization pages, photographs of her at expensive galas. They were calling for boycotts, demanding her resignation from various boards, posting her address and phone number. "This is getting out of control," Marcus muttered. Angela looked over his shoulder and gasped. "Marcus, they're destroying her." "She deserves it," Jasmine said flatly. "She's getting what she gave." But Marcus felt his stomach turn. Yes, Victoria had been cruel. Yes, she'd been racist and condescending and everything wrong with privilege unchecked. But this public evisceration, this digital mob justice, this wasn't what he wanted either. "No," Marcus said firmly, standing up. "This isn't right." "Dad, what are you talking about?" Jasmine looked confused. "She humiliated you publicly. Now she's being held accountable publicly." "Accountability and destruction aren't the same thing, Jazz." Marcus paced the small kitchen. "I confronted her at the hospital. She apologized. She's broken. Her husband almost died, and now the entire internet is trying to ruin her life. That's not justice. That's revenge. And I won't be part of it." Angela watched her husband with something like awe in her eyes. "What are you going to do?" Marcus took a deep breath. "I'm going to make a statement." 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in their small backyard, Angela holding his phone to record. The night air was cool, filled with the sound of crickets and distant traffic. He looked into the camera, his face tired but determined. "My name is Marcus Thompson. I'm the officer in the videos and news stories that have been circulating today. I want to address what happened, and I want to be very clear about something." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Yes, Mrs. Victoria Ashford said hurtful, racist things to me at my workplace today. Yes, she threatened my job and demeaned me based on my skin color. Those facts are not in dispute, and I won't pretend they didn't happen or that they didn't hurt. Racism is real, it's painful, and it's something too many people face every single day." Another pause. "However, I also want to say this. I did not save Robert Ashford's life to prove a point or to shame his wife. I saved him because it was my duty, my calling, and the right thing to do. Period. And now I'm watching Mrs. Ashford being torn apart on social media, having her personal information posted, receiving death threats, being doxxed and harassed. And I want that to stop." Marcus leaned closer to the camera, his voice intense. "If you're attacking this woman in my name, please stop. If you're using my story as an excuse to pour out your own hatred and anger, please stop. What she said was wrong. But responding with more hatred doesn't make the world better. It just makes more pain." He took a breath. "Mrs. Ashford and I had a conversation today. She apologized, she acknowledged her actions, and now she has a choice about who she becomes from here. We all do. Every single day we choose whether to spread more hate or to break the cycle. I'm choosing to break it. I'm asking you to do the same. Real change doesn't come from destroying people. It comes from holding them accountable, yes, but also giving them room to grow, to learn, to become better. Otherwise, what are we even fighting for?" Marcus looked directly into the camera. "I forgive Mrs. Ashford, not because she deserves it, but because carrying that anger would poison me and my family. And I'm asking anyone who respects me, anyone who was moved by my actions today, to do the same. Choose grace over grudges. Choose growth over destruction. Choose to be the change you want to see." He ended the recording. Angela lowered the phone, tears streaming down her face. "That was beautiful," she whispered. "Do you think it'll help?" Marcus asked. "I think," Angela said, pulling him close, "that you just showed the world what real courage looks like." They posted the video to Marcus's small social media account. Within an hour, it had been shared 10,000 times. Within 2 hours, 50,000. By morning, It would be everywhere, shifting the narrative, changing the conversation. At Charleston Memorial Hospital, Victoria Ashford sat beside her sleeping husband, her phone clutched in her hand. She'd been reading the comments about herself, each one a knife to her heart. She deserved them, she knew she did, but the volume of hatred was overwhelming. People she'd never met wished terrible things upon her, called her the vilest names, promised to ruin her life. Then a friend sent her the link to Marcus's video. Victoria watched it once, then twice. Then a third time, tears streaming down her face as she listened to this man she'd tried to destroy, defend her to the world. He didn't excuse what she'd done, but he stopped others from doing to her what she'd done to him. "Robert," she whispered to her unconscious husband, "I don't know how to become the person he's asking me to be, but I have to try. I have to." Her phone rang. It was Caroline, her daughter, calling from boarding school. Victoria had been dreading this call all night. "Mom?" Caroline's voice was thick with tears. "Mom, I saw everything. The videos, the news. Is it true? Did you really say those things to that officer?" Victoria closed her eyes. "Yes, baby. Yes, I did." Silence on the other end. Then, "How could you? You taught me to treat everyone with respect. You always said people were more than their circumstances. How could you be such a hypocrite?" The words hit harder than any internet comment. "Caroline, I'm ashamed of you, Mom." Caroline's voice broke. "I'm ashamed to have your name. All my friends have seen it. Everyone's talking about it. Do you know what that's like? Do you know how it feels to realize your mother is a racist?" Victoria finished quietly. "You can say it, Caroline, it's true." More silence. Then, in a small voice, "Are you going to change? Or are you just going to be sorry until this blows over?" It was the same question Marcus had asked her. The same choice presented from two different directions. "I'm going to change," Victoria said, her voice firm despite her tears. "I don't know how yet, but I'm going to change. I promise you, Caroline. On everything I love, I promise." "Then prove it," Caroline said. "Don't just apologize. Prove it." The call ended. Victoria sat in the quiet hospital room, her husband breathing steadily beside her, the machines beeping their steady rhythm. Outside the window, Charleston prepared for morning, unaware that in this small room a woman was dying to her old self, and trying desperately to figure out how to be born anew. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from her assistant. "Mrs. Ashford, the board of the Charleston Women's Foundation has requested your resignation. The Riverside Heights HOA is calling an emergency meeting regarding the incident. 3 other organizations have asked you to step down. What should I tell them?" Victoria stared at the email for a long time. Every instinct she had screamed to fight back, to use her lawyers, to protect her reputation and status. But then she thought of Marcus's words. "Apologies without change are just words." She typed a response. "Accept all resignations. Tell them I understand and will not contest their decisions." It's time I stepped back and did some serious reflection. She hit send before she could change her mind. Then Victoria opened a new email and addressed it to Marcus Thompson, care of the Charleston Police Department. "Officer Thompson," she wrote, her fingers trembling. "I watched your video. I don't deserve your defense, but I'm grateful for it. You asked what I would do to change. Here's my first step. I'm resigning from all my board positions and volunteer roles, not because I'm running away, but because I need to learn before I can lead. I need to listen before I can speak. I need to understand the harm I've caused before I can try to repair it. I don't know what comes next, but I wanted you to know that your mercy has given me a chance I didn't earn. I won't waste it. With profound regret and determination to be better, Victoria Ashford." She sent the email and then sat back, feeling simultaneously lighter and heavier than she'd ever felt. The road ahead would be long and painful. She'd lost respect, status, comfort. But she'd gained something more valuable, a mirror that showed her truth and a chance to become someone worth seeing in it. In the bed beside her, Robert stirred slightly, his eyes fluttering. Victoria took his hand gently. "I'm here," she whispered, "and I'm going to make this right, however long it takes, whatever it costs. I'm going to make this right." Outside, Charleston awakened to a new day, and in homes across the city, people talked about the officer who chose mercy and the woman who had to learn what mercy meant. Some conversations were angry, some were hopeful, but all of them were necessary. Because change never happens in silence. It happens when people are brave enough to break the silence with truth, with grace, with the hard work of becoming better than they were yesterday. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, with forgiveness we don't deserve but desperately need. 6 months later, the morning sun filtered through the windows of the Oakwood Community Center, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny stars. The building had been abandoned for years, its walls tagged with graffiti, its floors littered with debris. But now, dozens of volunteers moved through the space with purpose, painting walls, installing new flooring, setting up tables and chairs. Marcus Thompson stood in what would soon be the main hall, watching the transformation with quiet amazement. Beside him, Angela squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Can you believe this is really happening?" she whispered. Before Marcus could answer, a voice called out from the entrance. "Officer Thompson, Mrs. Thompson, the delivery truck is here with the computers." Marcus turned to see Victoria Ashford standing in the doorway, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and a paint-stained t-shirt. She looked different from the woman who had berated him at the gate 6 months ago, not just in appearance but in the way she carried herself. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something quieter, more genuine. "Thank you, Mrs. Ashford," Marcus said. "If you could direct them to the computer lab area, that would be great." "Please," Victoria said softly. "Call me Victoria. I think we're past formalities at this point." She disappeared to help with the delivery, and Angela looked at her husband with wonder. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have believed this was possible. Neither would Marcus. But the world had a way of surprising you when people chose to change. It had started with Victoria's email, the one she'd sent from the hospital. Marcus had read it and felt something shift in his chest. Not full forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of it. The recognition that true remorse looked like action, not just words. Robert Ashford had recovered slowly. The first month was critical, filled with surgeries and setbacks. But he survived, and as he healed physically, something else healed too. His understanding of the world he'd been insulated from. One afternoon, about 2 months after the accident, Robert had visited Marcus at the security gate. He'd come alone, walking with a cane, his movements still careful and deliberate. "Officer Thompson," he'd said, his voice humble in a way that spoke of hard lessons learned. "Could we talk?" They'd sat on the bench outside the security office, the same bench where Marcus had sat after saving Robert's life. And Robert had told his story. "I built my wealth in real estate," he'd said. "I saw properties, investments, numbers on spreadsheets. I never really saw people. I never saw the communities my developments displaced, the families who couldn't afford to live in the neighborhoods I helped gentrify. I never saw you." He'd looked at Marcus with tears in his eyes. "My wife's racism didn't come from nowhere. It came from the same system I benefited from, the same blindness I cultivated, and it almost killed me, literally." "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus had asked gently. "Because I'm selling my company," Robert had said. "Not all of it, but enough to make a difference. And I want to do something that matters, something that actually helps people instead of just moving money around." He'd paused. "Victoria and I have been talking. We want to create something meaningful, but we can't do it alone. We need guidance from people who actually understand the communities we've ignored. People like you." That conversation had led to another, then another. Slowly, carefully, a partnership had formed. Not one of equals in wealth or status, but one of shared purpose. The Ashfords had money. Marcus and Angela had understanding, connection, and credibility in communities like Oakwood. Together, they'd envisioned the center, a place offering free after-school programs, computer literacy classes, job training, mentorship, and community support. A place that didn't just give handouts but provided tools for self-determination. Victoria had thrown herself into the project with an intensity that surprised everyone, including herself. She'd spent the past 6 months learning, really learning. She'd volunteered at Angela's hospital, working alongside the nurses' aides she'd once looked through without seeing. She'd attended community meetings in Oakwood, sitting in the back, listening without speaking. She'd read books about systemic racism, about privilege, about the history she'd never been taught. It hadn't been easy. There were many in the community who didn't trust her, who saw her involvement as performative guilt. Marcus understood their skepticism. He'd felt it himself at first. But Victoria kept showing up, not with grand gestures or press releases, but with consistency. She painted walls. She stuffed envelopes for fundraising campaigns. She listened to people's stories without making them about herself. Slowly, grudgingly, some people began to give her a chance. "Hey, Dad." Jasmine's voice pulled Marcus from his memories. His daughter bounded over, her college sweatshirt dotted with paint. She'd deferred her acceptance for a year to help get the center running. "Ms. Rodriguez wants to know where you want the library shelves." "I'll be right there," Marcus said, smiling at his daughter's enthusiasm. As the day progressed, the center took shape. By late afternoon, when the sun painted everything golden, the volunteers gathered in the main hall for a break. Someone had brought pizza and sweet tea. Someone else had brought a speaker, and soft music filled the space. Robert Ashford arrived, moving slowly but surely without his cane now. Caroline was with him. She'd come home from boarding school for the weekend to help. At 17, she'd spent the past 6 months watching her parents transform, asking hard questions, and doing her own learning about the world beyond her privilege. "Can I have everyone's attention?" Robert called out, his voice still carrying the authority of a man used to boardrooms but tempered now with humility. The volunteers gathered, faces of all ages and backgrounds united in common purpose. "6 months ago," Robert began, his voice thick with emotion, "I almost died. And I was saved by a man I'd never met, whose wife had just treated with cruelty and contempt." He looked at Marcus. "Officer Thompson didn't have to save me. He had every reason to wait to do the minimum, but he didn't. He risked his life for mine, and in doing so, he saved more than just my physical life. He saved my soul." Victoria stepped forward to stand beside her husband, taking his hand. Her eyes were wet with tears. "I was that wife," she said, her voice clear despite shaking. "I said terrible things, racist things, things I can never take back or fully atone for. I humiliated a good man because I thought my wealth and my skin color gave me that right." She looked around the room. "Some of you here today still don't trust me. I understand that. Trust is earned, not given. But I want you to know that I'm committed to earning it, for however long it takes." She turned to Marcus and Angela. "The Thompsons showed me what real dignity looks like, what real strength is. It's not power over others. It's the power to choose mercy when you've been given every reason to choose revenge. It's the courage to forgive without forgetting, to hold people accountable while still giving them room to grow." Robert spoke again. "This center represents a new beginning, not just for Oakwood but for us. We're calling it the Marcus Thompson Community Center, in honor of the man whose character showed us what we should aspire to be." The room erupted in applause. Marcus felt his throat tighten, felt Angela's hand squeeze his. Jasmine hugged him from the side, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't do anything special," Marcus protested when the applause died down. "I just did what anyone should do." "But that's exactly the point," said Mrs. Rodriguez, a longtime Oakwood resident who'd been skeptical of the Ashfords at first. "You did what anyone should do, but what so few actually do. You chose humanity over hatred. And then," she looked at Victoria, "you helped someone else learn to do the same. An elderly man named Mr. Washington, who'd lived in Oakwood for 70 years, stood up slowly. I've seen a lot in my time, I've seen hatred passed down like family recipes. I've seen communities destroyed and people dismissed. But I've also seen miracles. And this, he gestured around the room. This is a miracle. Not because of money or buildings, but because people chose to change. Real change. The kind that costs you something. He walked over to Victoria, who tensed slightly, uncertain. Mr. Washington extended his hand. My grandson was killed by police 20 years ago, unarmed, innocent. I carried that pain every day. I would have been justified in hating every uniform I saw. He glanced at Marcus, then back to Victoria. But this young man showed me something. He showed me that individuals can break cycles. That mercy is stronger than bitterness. So I'm extending that same mercy to you. Welcome to Oakwood, Mrs. Ashford. Prove yourself worthy of this second chance. Victoria took his hand, tears flowing freely now. I will, sir. I promise you, I will. The gathering continued into the evening. People shared food, stories, laughter. The divisions that had seemed insurmountable 6 months ago began to feel a little less absolute. As the sun set, Marcus found himself standing outside the center with Robert. The two men looked at the building in companionable silence. You know, Robert said finally, before the accident, I thought I had everything figured out. Success, wealth, status, I thought that was what mattered. And now? Marcus asked. Now I know I had nothing figured out. I was rich and empty, successful and small. Robert turned to Marcus. You had so little compared to me, but you were the richest man I'd ever met. Rich in character, in integrity, in the things that actually matter. Marcus smiled. I'm not a saint, Robert. I struggled with anger after what Victoria said. I'm still struggling sometimes. This isn't easy for me either. But you chose to struggle toward something better instead of letting the struggle define you, Robert observed. That's the difference. They were interrupted by laughter from inside. Through the window, they could see Victoria teaching Caroline and Jasmine how to hang curtains, all three women laughing as they struggled with the measurements. My daughter doesn't want to go back to boarding school, Robert said. She wants to finish high school here in Charleston. She says she wants to be part of this community, this change. What do you think about that? Marcus asked. I think she's already wiser than I was at 40, Robert admitted. She sees what I spent most of my life blind to. That real wealth is measured in relationships and community, in the impact you have on lives beyond your own. Angela emerged from the building, calling out that it was time to lock up. The volunteers began trickling out, hugging each other, making plans for tomorrow's work. As Marcus locked the front door of the center, he thought about the journey that had brought them here. 6 months ago, he'd stood in the rain, absorbing humiliation and choosing dignity. He'd saved a life, and in doing so, had somehow saved several lives, including his own soul from the poison of bitterness. Marcus? Victoria approached hesitantly, Caroline beside her. Could we talk for a moment? They stood under the streetlight, the four of them, Marcus, Victoria, Caroline, and Jasmine, representing two families that should never have connected, but now were forever intertwined. I wanted to tell you something, Victoria said, looking at Jasmine. Your father changed my life, obviously. But you changed it too, Jasmine. Do you remember that essay you wrote for the center's website about breaking cycles of privilege? Jasmine nodded, surprised. I've read it probably 50 times, Victoria continued. You wrote that privilege isn't about guilt, it's about responsibility. That realization hit me harder than anything else. I'd been so focused on defending myself, on feeling guilty, that I hadn't thought about what I was responsible for changing. She turned to Marcus. Your daughter is going to change the world. Both your children are, Jasmine and Caroline, because they're learning lessons we had to learn the hard way. Caroline spoke up, her voice soft but clear. Miss Jasmine has been helping me understand things I never thought about before. About how the world sees me versus how it sees her. About the advantages I didn't even know I had. We're starting a podcast together about privilege and prejudice, told from 2 different perspectives. We're calling it Breaking the Gate, Jasmine added, glancing at her father with a meaningful smile. Marcus felt his heart swell with pride. This was the legacy that mattered. Not just a community center with his name on it, but young people choosing to build bridges instead of walls. "There's one more thing," Robert said, joining the group. "Marcus, Angela, we've set up a scholarship fund in your name. Full rides for students from underserved communities who want to pursue careers in public service. The first recipient is already selected." Angela gasped. "Robert, that's too much." "It's not nearly enough," Robert countered. "But it's a start, a way to multiply the impact of what you've shown us, that serving others is the highest calling." As they said their goodbyes and prepared to head home, Marcus felt Angela lean against him, tired but happy. Jasmine walked ahead with Caroline, the two young women already deep in conversation about their podcast. "Do you think it's real?" Angela asked softly. "The change in them?" Marcus thought about it carefully. "I think it's real," he said finally. "Because real change looks exactly like this, messy, ongoing, sometimes uncomfortable. It's not a moment of enlightenment. It's 1,000 small choices to be better than you were yesterday." They walked through Oakwood streets, past houses where porch lights glowed warm and welcoming, past playgrounds where children's laughter still echoed, past corner stores where neighbors gathered to talk about their days. This was home. Not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs, built on hard work and hope, on struggle and survival, on the deep understanding that community wasn't about sameness, but about showing up for each other, especially when it was hard. When they reached their small house, Marcus paused before going inside. He looked up at the stars emerging in the darkening sky and said a silent prayer of gratitude, not for the easy things, but for the hard lessons that had transformed everyone involved. Inside, Jasmine made tea while they recounted the day's progress. The phone rang several times. Reporters still occasionally called, wanting updates on the viral story of the officer and the woman who'd humiliated him. Marcus declined most interviews. This wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about something far more important: the quiet daily work of building a better world, one choice at a time. That night, as Marcus lay in bed beside Angela, she whispered, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd made a different choice? If you'd let anger win?" "Sometimes," Marcus admitted. "But then I remember that I didn't just save Robert that day. I saved myself. Because if I'd let hatred determine my actions, I'd have become someone I didn't recognize. Someone my daughter couldn't be proud of. Someone my mother wouldn't recognize." "Your mother would be so proud of you," Angela said softly. Marcus smiled in the darkness, remembering his grandmother's words about not drinking poison and expecting others to die. She'd understood something profound, that mercy wasn't weakness, it was the ultimate strength. 1 year later, the Marcus Thompson Community Center celebrated its grand opening with a neighborhood festival. Hundreds of people attended: residents of Oakwood, members of the Riverside Heights community, city officials, and people from all over Charleston who'd been moved by the story of transformation and redemption. Marcus stood on the stage, looking out at the crowd. He saw Mr. Washington teaching a group of teenagers about community history. He saw Mrs. Rodriguez leading a cooking class in the center's new kitchen. He saw Caroline and Jasmine at a table signing people up for their podcast and discussion groups. And he saw Victoria, not at the front, not seeking attention, but in the corner of the room, helping elderly residents navigate the computer lab, patient and kind and completely present. When it was time for speeches, the mayor praised the center as a model for community development. The police chief talked about building bridges between law enforcement and communities. Business leaders pledged support, but it was Mr. Washington who said what everyone was thinking. "This center represents something more than programs and services," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 7 decades of wisdom. "It represents what's possible when people choose growth over grudges, when they choose to see each other's humanity despite, and because of, their differences." A year ago, 2 families stood on opposite sides of a gate. One had money and power, but no vision. The other had dignity and principle, but no platform. Today they stand together, building something neither could build alone. That's not just a success story. That's a blueprint for how we move forward as a society. The applause was thunderous, but Marcus noticed something more moving than any ovation. Victoria and Robert standing with Caroline, all three of them crying as they looked at what they'd helped create. Not to absolve themselves of past wrongs, but to contribute to future rights. After the formal program ended, as people explored the center and enjoyed the festival, Marcus found himself back at the entrance with Victoria. They stood side by side, watching the community come alive in the space they'd helped build. "I'll never be able to thank you enough," Victoria said quietly. "Not just for Robert's life, but for mine. You thank me by continuing to show up," Marcus replied. "By continuing to do the work, especially when it's hard, especially when no one's watching." Victoria nodded. "I used to think happiness came from having what I wanted. Now I understand it comes from becoming who I should be." "And who's that?" Marcus asked. Victoria thought for a moment, watching Caroline help a young child with a computer game. "Someone my daughter can be proud of. Someone who uses privilege to lift others up instead of putting them down. Someone who finally understands that we're all connected, and that hurting others always eventually hurts ourselves." Marcus smiled. "That's a good person to become." As the sun set on the festival, the community center glowed with light and life. Children played in the courtyard, teenagers explored the computer lab, adults attended workshops and connected over shared meals. It was noisy and chaotic and absolutely beautiful. Angela found Marcus and took his hand. "Ready to go home?" "Almost," Marcus said. He wanted to savor this moment a little longer, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Real change, real growth, real community built on the foundation of real forgiveness. As they finally left that evening, Jasmine walking between them, Marcus thought about that rainy day a year ago. He thought about the choice he'd made in a split second, to run toward danger instead of away from it, to choose mercy over bitterness, to see a human being in need instead of an enemy who deserved suffering. That one choice had rippled outward in ways he never could have imagined, touching lives and changing hearts, proving that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply treating others with the dignity you wish you'd been shown. "Dad?" Jasmine said as they walked home through the warm evening. "I've been thinking about my college essay, about what I want to write for my scholarship applications." "Yeah?" Marcus asked. "I want to write about you," Jasmine said. "About what you taught me that day, that our response to injustice defines us more than the injustice itself, that we always have a choice about who we become, regardless of what others do to us." Marcus stopped walking and pulled his daughter into a hug. "You write whatever your heart tells you to write, baby girl. But remember, it wasn't just me. It was your mom, working double shifts and still choosing kindness. It was Mr. Washington, choosing to forgive when he had every reason not to. It was Victoria, choosing the hard work of change over the comfort of staying the same. We're all just people trying to be better than our worst moments." "That's exactly what I want to write about," Jasmine said, her eyes shining. "About how change is possible, how mercy is powerful, how one person's choice to do the right thing can transform everything." As they continued home, the Oakwood neighborhood settling into its evening rhythm, Marcus realized something profound. He'd started that day as a security officer at a gate, keeping people in or out based on their authorization. But he'd ended up doing something far more important, opening gates between people, between communities, between who we are and who we could be. The gate at Riverside Heights still stood, of course, but it meant something different now. It was no longer a symbol of division, but a reminder that barriers, whether physical or spiritual, could be overcome with courage, grace, and the simple, radical act of seeing each other's humanity. And somewhere in Charleston, a city built on a complicated history of wealth and poverty, privilege and oppression, a community center bearing Marcus Thompson's name stood as a testament to a simple truth, that the longest journey in the world is the journey from judgment to understanding, from bitterness to forgiveness, from who we've been to who we can become. but it's a journey worth taking. Always. Because in the end, we're all just standing at gates of our own making, deciding whether to let others in or keep them out. And the choice we make, in that moment of decision, in that instant when we could go either way, that choice echoes far beyond ourselves, rippling outward in waves of consequence we can barely imagine. Marcus Thompson had made his choice in the rain, and the world was better for it. Not perfect, not healed of all wounds, but better. And better, as it turns out, is enough to begin with. Better is always enough to begin with. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to never miss stories of courage and justice, like if you believe dignity matters. Share to inspire someone who needs hope today. Your voice counts.